I thought our life was small, but honest, and I liked it that way. We ate cheap dinners, laughed at broken furniture, and promised each other things would grow slowly. When Leela walked in that night, she held an envelope like it was glowing. Asked, "What's that?" She smiled too wide. "It's an offer," she said. I joked, "From who? The lottery?" She shook her head. "From Adrian Cross." The name sat heavy. I said, "The Billionaire." She nodded. My stomach tightened. I tried to laugh. "What? Why would he want you?" She whispered, "Because I'm good." I felt cold inside. I said, "Tell me everything." She dropped into the chair and breathed fast. "It's temporary," she said. "Personal assistant? Travel? Real money?" I asked, "How real?" She named a number that made me quiet. I repeated it per month. She nodded. I stared at the wall. "That fixes rent," I muttered. She leaned forward. "It fixes everything." I wanted to say no. Instead, I said, "When do you start?" She answered softly, "If I sign." Tonight, my chest hurt. I smiled anyway. "Then sign," I told her. "We need this." She hugged me hard and shook quietly with hope tonight. I held her while she trembled, and I whispered, "I'm proud of you." She laughed into my shirt. "You sound scared," I admitted. "I am." She pulled back. "Why?" I searched for an answer. "Because rich men don't hire strangers for nothing." She rolled her eyes. "You watch too many movies." I said, "Maybe." She touched my face. "This is our chance." I nodded slowly. "Promise you won't disappear." She frowned. "I'm not leaving you." I forced a grin. "Then I'm fine." Inside, I wasn't fine at all. I felt something slipping through my hands already, and I hated it. Marco called while we were still talking, and I put him on speaker. He said, "You got the offer?" Lila answered, "Yes." He whistled. "That's huge?" I asked. "You knew?" He laughed. "Everyone knows Adrian Cross," Lila said. "He wants me tomorrow." Marco shouted, "Take it." I hesitated. "It feels fast." Marco replied, "Fast money is still money." Lila squeezed my hand. "We can breathe again," I told him. "I'm driving her." He said, "You better." His excitement filled the room more than mine did. I looked at Lila and whispered, "Stay safe." She nodded and smiled like a stranger. She signed the contract at our kitchen table, and the pen shook in her fingers. I asked, "Are you sure?" She answered, "I have to be." Marco texted, "Congratulations," and fireworks emojis covered. "The screen?" I said. "He's celebrating already." Leela laughed. "So should you." I tried. "Congratulations," I repeated. The word tasted thin. She folded the papers. "This changes us." I replied, "It doesn't change me." She kissed my cheek. "It changes everything," she corrected gently. I watched her pack a small bag and felt the room shrinking around me. I wanted to stop her, but stayed quiet instead. In the car, silence sat between us, like another passenger. I said, "You don't have to impress him," she replied. "I know." "How to work," I nodded. "I'm just saying." She stared out the window. "You're scared I'll like it there?" I answered honestly, "Yes." She sighed. "I'm coming home," I asked, "every night?" She paused. "Most nights." My hands tightened on the wheel. "That's not the same," she whispered. "It's still us." Didn't argue. But the road felt longer than it ever had before. I counted every second and wished we could turn back already somehow tonight forever. The mansion gates opened without a sound, and I felt small driving through them. Lila breathed. "Oh my God," I said. "It's a different planet." She laughed softly. "This is work." I parked near the entrance. A guard approached. "Name?" he asked. I answered, "Lila." He checked a tablet.
Alcohol.
Lila squeezed my arm. "See? Easy." I forced a smile. "Call me if you need anything." She nodded quickly. "I will." The doors were taller than our building, and they swallowed her shadow before I could memorize it. I sat there breathing slowly and felt the lock click inside me. I stepped out to hug her, and she smelled nervous and excited. I said, "Last chance." "To run?" She smiled. "Not happening." I held her tighter. "Remember dinner tomorrow?" she replied. I'll try. The words stung. I asked. Try. She kissed me fast. I'll call you. A man in a suit waited behind her. He said, Mr. Cross is expecting her. I nodded. Take care of her, he answered. Of course. She walked away without looking back, and I stayed frozen beside the car. Wanted to shout her name, but swallowed it and watched the doors close slowly forever. I sat there long after she vanished, gripping the wheel like it could answer me. I whispered, this is good. My voice shook. This helps us. The guard glanced over, and I pretended to smile. I started the engine. You're being dramatic, I told myself. The mansion lights burned behind me like a sunrise I couldn't touch, I said aloud. She's working. The word echoed wrong. I drove toward home and felt every mile stretch wider between who we were and who we were becoming. I kept repeating her name softly and hoped it still belonged to me tonight somehow. When I reached our apartment, silence greeted me first. I said I'm home, out of habit. No answer came back. I laughed quietly. Of course not. I sat on the couch and stared at her empty chair. This is temporary, I reminded the room. My phone stayed dark. I whispered, call me. Minutes passed like hours. I lay back and closed my eyes. We're fine, I promised myself. The promise sounded fragile. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, I felt the door close again. I breathed slowly and wondered if it would ever open for us again tonight, truly. I stopped hearing her keys at night. The apartment learned her absence before I did. I called her and said, are you coming home? She answered, I'm busy, I asked. Busy until when? She paused. Late, I whispered. You said most nights? She replied. This job isn't normal. I laughed softly. Neither is sleeping alone. She didn't answer right away. Don't make this hard, she said. I stared at the wall. I'm not trying to. She sighed. I'll call later. The line went dead and I sat there, holding silence like it weighed something heavy inside me tonight. Her messages turned into short shapes instead of words. I typed, did you eat? She replied, yes. I asked, are you okay? She sent, fine. I wrote, I miss you. The screen stayed blank. Minutes passed. Then she sent, working. I stared at the single word and laughed bitterly. I called Marco and said, she's disappearing. He answered, she's working. I snapped, that's not the same. He chuckled. You wanted money? I whispered, I wanted her. He went quiet for a second. You're overthinking, he said finally. I hung up and felt smaller than the room around me. When she came home after 3 days, she looked polished and distant. I hugged her and smelled perfume that wasn't ours. Asked, new scent? She said, it's everywhere, seeps in. I tried to smile. You look expensive. She laughed lightly. That's funny. Pulled back. I'm serious. She walked past me. It's just work. I followed her. You didn't call? She dropped her bag. I was exhausted, said. I waited. She turned slowly. You're acting needy. The word hit harder than I expected. I stepped back. I'm acting married, I replied. She looked away and didn't answer. I called Marco again after she showered. I whispered, something's wrong. He sighed. Nothing's wrong. Said she smells like another life. He laughed. That's perfume, not betrayal. I snapped. Stop joking. He grew serious. Listen to me. I stayed quiet. This is opportunity, he continued. Don't ruin it with fear, I asked. You'd feel fine? He paused. I'd feel rich. I ended the call without replying. The bathroom door opened and she stepped out wrapped in a towel. She asked, who were you talking to? I answered, no one important. The lie tasted bitter. That night she slept facing away from me. I whispered, are you happy? She murmured, I'm safe. I frowned. That's not what I asked. She said, it's what matters. I touched her shoulder. We were safe. She shook her head. We were surviving. I pulled my hand back. That's different? She answered quietly. Very. I stared at her back and felt a wall grow between us. I said, I don't recognize you. Replied, you will. I closed my eyes and wondered if recognition meant losing her completely. Sleep never came, only the sound of distant breathing beside me. 2 nights later, she didn't come home at all. I texted, "Are you alive?" She replied, "At work?" I wrote, "I'm coming there." She sent back instantly, "Don't." My chest tightened. I typed, "Why not?" She answered, "It's not allowed." I stared at the message until anger replaced fear. I grabbed my keys and whispered, "Watch me." The drive felt unreal. I kept hearing her voice repeating, "Not allowed," like a warning. When the gates appeared again, I felt smaller than before, but kept driving anyway. The guard stepped forward. I rolled down the window and said, "I'm here for my wife." Looked at me calmly. "Name," I answered, "Lila." He checked his screen. "She's occupied." I clenched my jaw. "I'll wait." He shook his head. "You can't." I stepped out of the car. "I'm not leaving." He blocked my path without touching me, "Sir, please." I laughed bitterly. "Please what?" He didn't move. I whispered, "I just want to see her." He studied my face and sighed. 5 minutes. The gate opened slowly, and I walked through feeling like I crossed into someone else's dream. The house glowed brighter than memory, and I felt invisible walking toward it. Inside, a woman in a dark suit approached me. She said, "You shouldn't be here." I answered, "I'm her husband." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm Alina." I nodded stiffly. "Then you know who I am." She studied me for a long second. "Follow me," she said quietly. I walked. Behind her, through halls bigger than our entire apartment, voices echoed somewhere ahead. Alina stopped suddenly. "Wait here." I heard laughter around the corner. A man said, "She fits perfectly." Another voice replied, "She understands her role." Then I heard Leela laugh softly, and my heart dropped. I leaned closer without thinking. The man spoke again. "You're comfortable?" Leela answered. "Very." He said, "You're part of this house now." She replied, "I know." My breath stopped. I stepped around the corner before I could stop myself. She turned and froze. I whispered, "Part of the house?" Her eyes filled with panic. "You weren't supposed to come." I laughed shakily. "That's what you say?" Man watched me calmly. I ignored him. "Tell me I heard wrong." She shook her head slowly. "You didn't." The hallway felt like it tilted under my feet. I asked, "What are you doing?" She swallowed, "Choosing security." The words came out steady. I repeated them. "Security." She nodded. "I can't go back." I stared at her. "To what?" she whispered, struggling. I felt something tear inside me. "That was our life," replied softly. "Not anymore." I stepped back. "So that's it?" She closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," I laughed once. "You don't sound sorry," the man said calmly. "This isn't necessary." I turned toward him. "Stay out of this." He smiled faintly, and I realized I had already lost. Alina touched my arm gently. "You should leave." I looked at Leela one last time. I said, "Are you coming with me?" She shook her head. "I can't." I nodded slowly. "Then I won't ask again." Voice sounded distant even to me. I turned and walked without waiting. The house swallowed the sound of my steps. Outside, the air felt thin. Victor opened the gate silently. I whispered, "Thank you." He didn't answer. I drove away shaking, and every mile felt like a goodbye. I didn't choose. Love lost to money didn't scream. It died quietly inside me forever. I stopped caring about mornings. My alarm rang and I told it, "Shut up." I still went to work, but my hands moved slower than my thoughts. My boss said, "You're slipping." I answered, "I know." He crossed his arms. "This isn't like you." I laughed quietly. "I'm not like me anymore." He stared. "Take a day off." I shook my head. "I need the money." He softened. "You need sleep." I whispered, "I need my life back." He didn't reply. I sat at my desk and stared at the screen, and the letters refused to make sense in front of me anymore. Marco showed up during lunch like nothing had changed. He sat across from me and said, "You look terrible." I replied, "You look comfortable." He smirked. "I got a contract." I frowned. "With who?" He hesitated. "Adrian's company." My chest went cold. You're joking. He shook his head. It's business. I leaned forward. You knew. He sighed. I knew it could happen. I whispered, you pushed her there. He snapped. I pushed opportunity. I laughed once. You pushed me out. He looked away. Don't blame me for your fear. Did. The table felt too small for the truth. I asked quietly. How long? He rubbed his neck. Months. I repeated it. Months. He nodded. I didn't want to hurt you? I laughed. You didn't want to lose access. He flinched. That's unfair. I leaned back. It's honest. He whispered, I needed this job. I answered, you needed my wife too. His palm down. Stop. I stared at him. You stood there and told me to let her go. He breathed hard. Because I believed in the money. I shook my head slowly. You believed in the man who bought her. Silence swallowed the rest. After he left, I sat alone and felt the anger sharpen instead of burn. I whispered, good. It scared me how calm I sounded. My phone buzzed. Lila's name filled the screen. I answered, what? She cried, I can't breathe here. I stood up fast. What happened? She whispered, he controls everything. I said, you chose this, she sobbed. I didn't understand. I closed my eyes. Now, you do. She begged. Please help me. I swallowed hard. Why should I? She answered, because you loved me. I replied quietly. Love doesn't erase cages you build yourself. She whispered. I'm scared, said so am I. She cried harder. He watches me. I asked, can you leave? She said, not without losing everything. I laughed bitterly. You already did, she begged. Don't say that. I stayed silent. She whispered, I regret it. I answered, regret is cheap. She pleaded, I need you. I looked at the window and felt the old pain trying to return. I said slowly, I won't beg for you again. She breathed, then what will you do? I answered, I'll fight for me. The line went quiet. I called Marco back. He answered, what now? I said, I know about the accounts. He froze. What accounts? I replied calmly, the hidden ones. He cursed softly. You shouldn't know that. I smiled. Faintly, he left files open. He whispered, delete them. I laughed. Why? He hissed, because it's dangerous. I said, good. He panicked. You don't understand, Adrian, I answered. I understand theft. He breathed fast. You'll get us killed, I whispered. You already killed us. He hung up, and I felt the power shift like a quiet storm. I printed everything and held the papers like weapons. My hands stopped shaking. I said to myself, this is survival. The word felt cleaner than revenge. I searched one name and found Detective Rowan. I called the number. Voice answered, Rowan. I said, I have evidence. He replied, of what? I whispered, a billionaire. He laughed softly. They all have evidence. I answered, this one sticks. Meet me, I asked. Where? He said, somewhere public. I nodded. I'll be there for the first time in weeks. I felt steady walking out. Rowan studied the papers in silence. He finally said, you're brave. I answered, I'm desperate. He smirked. That's the same thing sometimes. I leaned forward. Can you use this? He nodded slowly. Yes, I whispered. Will you? Looked at me hard. If you accept consequences. I asked, what kind? He replied, noise. I laughed quietly. My life is already loud. He slid the folder back. Once I start, it won't stop. I met his eyes. Neither will I. He smiled faintly. Then we understand each other. I shook his hand and didn't look back. My phone rang again as I left. Lila whispered, he's angry. I asked why. She said someone's investigating. I breathed slowly. Good. She panicked. What did you do? I answered, I chose dignity. She cried, he'll destroy you. I laughed softly. He already tried. She whispered, "Please be careful." I said, "You too." She asked, "Do you hate me?" I paused. "I don't have time for hate." She sobbed, "I wish I stayed." I answered, "So do I." The words hurt, but they didn't break me this time. That night, Marco showed up at my door shaking. He said, "Tell me you didn't." I replied, "I did." He grabbed my shirt. "You'll ruin us." Hey. I pushed his hands away. "You ruined us first." He whispered, "I'm scared." I answered, "Welcome to honesty." He looked at me like I was a stranger. "Why are you calm?" I said quietly, because I stopped waiting outside doors. He stepped back. "You're going to burn everything." I nodded. "Only what was rotten." He stared at me and realized I wasn't bluffing. The fear in his eyes felt like balance finally restored. When he left, I locked the door and leaned against it. I whispered, "This is me now." The apartment felt different. Not empty, but sharp. My phone buzzed with unknown numbers and I ignored them. I said aloud, "I'm done running." The words settled inside me like stone. For the first time since the mansion, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous in a quiet, steady way. I walked to the window and looked at the city. I whispered, "You took everything." Then I smiled faintly. Now I'm taking myself back. And I meant every word. The news broke while I was making coffee. The anchor said, "Adrian Cross is under investigation." And I laughed into the steam. I whispered, "That was fast." My phone exploded with messages. Marco texted, "We're dead." I replied, "No, he is." He called instantly. "You ruined everything," I answered calmly. I told the truth. He shouted, "Truth doesn't protect people." I sipped my coffee. "It protects me." He breathed hard. "They're arresting executives." I said, "Good." He whispered, "I'm cooperating." I smiled faintly. "Of course you are." The call ended, and the silence felt clean for once in my life. I walked to work, and every screen showed his face. A coworker said that guy owned half the city. I answered, "Not anymore." He laughed. "Money always wins." I shook my head. "Not today." My phone rang again. Lila's voice came through shaking. "It's over," I asked. "What is?" She whispered, "Everything." I leaned against the wall. "You sound surprised." She cried softly. "They took the house." I said quietly, "It was never yours." She begged, "Can I see you?" I closed my eyes. "Why?" she answered. "Because I have nowhere else." I breathed slowly and said, "Come." She arrived an hour later carrying a small bag and broken pride. I opened the door and she whispered, "Hi." I stepped aside. "Sit." She looked around the apartment. "It's the same." I nodded. "I am too." She sat carefully. "I lost everything," I replied. "You traded everything." Tears filled her eyes. "I know." I stayed standing. "What do you want from me?" She shook her head. "Nothing. You can give." I waited. She whispered, "I just wanted to see you." I asked, "To remember?" She nodded. "To apologize." The word hung in the room like dust. We both breathed. She said, "I thought security meant safety." I answered, "It meant control." She wiped her face. "I didn't see it." I crossed my arms. "You didn't look." She flinched. "You're right." I expected anger in me, but found only distance. She whispered, "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "I don't carry that anymore." She looked up slowly. "Then what do you feel?" I thought for a moment. Finished. The honesty shocked her. "I deserved that." I nodded once. "You do." She cried quietly, and I didn't reach for her. That silence was my final boundary. She said I wanted to come. "Home," I answered. "This isn't your home." She looked at the floor. "I know," I added softly. "It's mine now." She nodded. "I understand." We sat there breathing the same air, but living different lives. She asked, "Are you okay?" I surprised myself by smiling. "Yes." She studied my face. "You look stronger." I shrugged. "Pain teaches fast," she whispered. "I wish I learned sooner." I replied. So do I. The regret in her voice felt real, but it didn't pull me back. It only confirmed how far I had already walked without her. Marco called while she was still there. I answered on speaker. He shouted. They're charging him, I said calmly. I saw. He breathed out. I made a deal. I replied. I assumed. He whispered. I saved myself. I glanced at Lila. You always do? He hesitated. Do you hate me? I laughed quietly. I don't think about you. The silence on his end stretched. He said softly. I'm sorry, I answered. That's your weight, not mine. I hung up and looked at her. She whispered, Everyone's falling. I nodded. Gravity finally works again. The words felt steady. She stood slowly and picked up her bag. I won't stay long, I replied. You don't have to rush. She smiled sadly. You're kinder than I deserve. I shook my head. I'm just done fighting. She stepped closer. Can I hug you? I paused, then nodded once. She wrapped her arms around me and cried into my shoulder. I felt the past trying to wake up, but it stayed quiet. I whispered, Goodbye, Lila. She pulled back. Goodbye. The words sounded heavier coming from her. She walked to the door and stopped. Thank you for loving me once, I answered. You're welcome. Oh. When the door closed, I didn't. Chase it. I leaned against the wall and listened to my heart. It beat steady, not broken. I whispered, You survived. The apartment felt full instead of empty. My phone buzzed with headlines and panic from people I no longer owed anything. I ignored it. I walked to the window and watched the city move without him. Without her, without Marco. I said quietly, This is mine. The life looked smaller than the dream she chased, but it was solid. I breathed in and felt grounded in a way money never offered me before. I stepped outside and let the air hit my face. A stranger bumped my shoulder and said, Sorry. I answered, It's fine. The simplicity of that exchange made me laugh. I wasn't a victim walking through ruins. I was a man walking forward. My phone rang once more. Rowan said, You did good, I replied. We did, he chuckled. I smiled. I planned to. I ended the call and kept walking. Every step felt like proof I still existed beyond betrayal. I whispered, I'm alive. The words tasted better than revenge ever could have. I returned home as the sun dropped behind the buildings. I said to the empty room, We're okay. The silence agreed. I sat down and closed my eyes, not to escape but to rest. Images of the mansion faded, replaced by the sound of my own breathing. I whispered, This is enough. Victory, it was peace. I didn't win her back. I didn't destroy the world. I rebuilt mine. I opened my eyes and smiled at the small, honest space around me. I said softly, I walked out alive. And for the first time, that felt like everything I ever needed.